10,000 U.S. troops already in Panama. Why? Why do we have all those troops in Panama, Sam?
The canal.
The canal. It was essentially already very much controlled and dominated by the United States. And it wasn't a bombing operation that hit various installations around the country. It was a much more specific extraction of Noriega, and the infrastructure was in place to continue the government once he was removed. And it's a much, much smaller country, both in population and in area than Venezuela, and didn't have all the it's not just, by the way, the Maduro government. There are all kinds of factions, military, paramilitary operations going on in Venezuela. It's not just the Maduro government. So there really isn't any comparison with Panama. Is it possible that this could succeed? Of course. Anything is possible. But so far we haven't seen any indication of how they are going to run the country to create a stable, prosperous democracy.
To me, it has too many similarities to past failures,
Much closer.
To Iraq, to Vietnam, Vietnam, communism
Chile,
bad. Yeah.
Guatemala.
Yeah, and in Vietnam, we're like, communism bad. In Venezuela, Trump is like, communism bad. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein bad. Maduro bad. Oil, parallels. There's just too many.
Chile, Dominican Republic, Guatemala. There are so many horrific examples of American intervention and attempted regime change in Latin America.
I want to give a shout out to G. Wan, who gifted 10 memberships.
Wow, thank you.
Appreciate that a lot. Robert Poole says, getting involved in Iraq and Afghanistan, they were both popular at first. How'd that work out in the long run? That's a good point too, is, some of these things early on might seem like they're working or be popular, but, once you continue foreign entanglements for years and decades to come, it's hard to come out on the other end and things to just be honky-dory,
Libya, too, is another example. Let me tell you, there's a distinction, though, because those actions, even though, Afghanistan was right away, Iraq was a couple of years later, were at least in part justified by the horrific 9/11 attacks, right? There was this kind of fervor built up in the United States. Also, Iraq was justified by the fear that they were developing nuclear weapons and had chemical and biological weapons. And so it's not surprising that there was strong support for them early on. None of those conditions apply right now. I don't think, despite all the propaganda they're putting out, that you're going to get strong American support for what's going on in Venezuela.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. There's not enough prerequisite for Americans to be like, you know what, I'm in. And again, Trump ran on this idea that resonated with Americans. We just don't want to. Yes, there are bad actors all across the world, but we just don't want to be involved in regime change and running other countries, etc.
And I don't know if this is true, but there are those who say this is a distraction from the horrific problems he's facing at home, right? Prices continue.
Yeah, Tina J just donated $2 and said, Trump did this to distract from the Epstein files.
Well, there's not just the Epstein files. There's the disaster with the insurance premiums for failing to renew the Affordable Care Act subsidies. There are the continuing rising prices, terrible job market, terrible housing market. By a wide margin, people believe that their finances, their personal situation is getting worse, not better. He claims, I've saved the country. We would have been Venezuela if we had Biden. But in many respects, the Biden economy and the Biden situation was better than what we've seen from Donald Trump in his first year.
RG clarifies that there was not strong support to invade Iraq.
I think there was very early on, but that's a good question. I think there was support.
Now, one thing that also sort of confused me about what Trump said in his press conference is he said, the U.S. will now be running Venezuela. Here, get it? Okay.
What does that mean?
Hold on, let me finish my thought, Dad.
Sorry.
You keep interrupting me. He said that the U.S. will be running Venezuela, but he also said that the vice president who Maduro appointed is now the president of Venezuela, and they are now running the country. He prefaced that by saying, well, she's going to listen to everything the U.S. says. He's already talked to her, and she's promised to listen to him. So even this idea of running Venezuela to me already seemed a little bit murky, because one of Maduro's great loyalists is instantly becoming the president. She's currently the president. Again, Trump claims that she'll be listening to him, whatever that means. But why doesn't he, if we are running the country, why doesn't he try to install, again, if he's going to be part of regime change, why doesn't he try to install Machado, who escaped the country, who was the main opposition leader, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize?
Very confusing.
Yeah.
Here's what he said. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. We don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in and have the same situation we have had. Trump provided few details of how this is not Trump anymore, this is Politico. Trump provided few details of how the U.S. would lead the Latin American country, other than it would be a quote-unquote group likely to include Secretary of State Marco Rubio and, oh my God, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. And Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Kane. And he also raised the possibility of another attack.
Right.
He didn't rule that out. Trump doesn't say things very clearly, but he seemed to say, well, we don't think it's going to be necessary, but it may be. We may have to attack them. Again, totally destroying the fundamental legal rationale, Sam, right? The legal rationale was we're in there legally because there's an indicted criminal to extract. Well, he's been extracted. Can that legal rationale justify a second strike?
Yeah, good point. I mean, as I've thought more about it, I don't know if I'm going to go as far as saying it's a war crime, but it certainly seems like an illegal military action. Right. Just if you think about the U.S. Constitution alone, they acted without Congress. Seems illegal to me.
And it was not a surgical extraction. Somehow that was missed in the press conference. They bombed 3 other installations that had nothing to do with extracting Maduro.
Yeah. And again, why not, if you're so worried about the people of Venezuela, if you really want to be involved in regime change, why not put the woman who just won the Nobel Peace Prize in power? Right. This idea that the Maduro's vice president is now running the country, but she'll listen to this team led by Rubio and Hegseth. I don't know. It all seems strange.
Yeah, he said, we're ready to go again if we have to, totally destroying the rationale for the first strike. And we are, quote, not afraid of boots on the ground, unquote. Further destruction of the claimed legal rationale for this.
Yeah, I did, like you said, I can't see this being even remotely popular with the American people. It's just he's got so little to justify all this on. Again, drugs and Maduro's a bad guy and communism. Again, it's like we've fallen for all this before. I don't think the American people can stomach all this sort of lightly built reasoning for attacking another country, spending millions of American taxpayers' dollars, bombing people, using military soldiers, et cetera, et cetera. Again, he claims it's all going to be free because there's going to be they're going to make so much money from the oil, but I doubt it.
And the other thing is, he's not going to persuade anyone who already thinks he's doing a bad job, which is the great majority of the Americans disapprove by double digits, by any of the aggregations, anywhere from 12 to 17 points underwater, including heavily underwater on foreign policy. So a hefty majority already disapproves of how he's conducting foreign affairs and generally how he's conducting the presidency. Is he going to persuade any of them to approve of this, Sam, who already disapprove of his approach?
Doubt it.
Doubt it. So the chances, and even some of those who approve may not like this because this does go against what he pledged. And, some of his Republican critics, very few of them, are already beginning to point that out.
Colin M. says, the war will pay for itself from the oil proceeds, ? Where have I heard that before? Yeah, I can't even imagine how that is going to work exactly in terms of like private companies are going to be making money on the oil and then donating to the U.S. military operations. It doesn't make any sense.
The people who, if this all happens, and who knows where this is going, it's going to be his big donors from the big oil industry who are going to make out. Again, follow the money. Forget everything else. It's all smokescreen.
Right. And,
just look at what he said about the oil.
And, obviously the big promise of Trump was, we're going to build this beautiful wall across the southern border and Mexico is going to pay for it. Obviously they didn't. He keeps promising that the tariff money is going to go back to us. But so far, all it's done is really raise prices. So again, it's like,
Or I'm going to end the Ukraine war on day one.
Well, I'm talking specifically about him mentioning instances where he enacts a policy and then promises it's going to pay for itself.
Yeah. And he didn't quickly back off Mexico paying for the war. He pushed that for years, even long after it was totally obvious they weren't going to give us a centavo.
I guess it would make sense if Trump created some sort of, he's sort of already doing this, but some sort of government oil company that, pumps the money right back into the military operations. That sounds pretty communist to me. I don't know.
It's, this is going to play out not over days, weeks, and months, but over years before we really know what the consequences were. How long did the war in Afghanistan last?
20 years.
Yeah.
22 years.
War in Iraq, 5 or 6 years. War in Vietnam, a decade. These things don't resolve themselves very quickly. The instability in Guatemala went on for decades. Thanks for watching our video. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a member today.